Rajeev, thank you so much for coming on today and telling us about your company and about your story. Let's get started with your background and how you sort of came into this space. Tell us about you.
Sure. That was first. Thanks for inviting me here. Right. The opportunity to be able to present to you is something that I take as an honor. Now,
Thank
me
you.
myself, I have worked about 17 years in the industry, in all kinds of consumer electronic companies, ranging from chipsets in companies like Texas Instruments to finished products at companies like Amazon, Google, Snapchat, and most recently at Skip Transport, where I was building electronic kick scooters, much like what Bird and Lime have out there.
Yeah.
Having built consumer electronic gadgets for years and years and years, and realized that most of them end up in your bedside drawer or in e-waste, I decided why not take a step back, take a drastic pay cut, and try to do something different, try to do something that actually makes a difference to someone. And that's where I chanced upon this idea of building an autonomous wheelchair. And the way I came across this is quite simply the fact that having to had traveled so much for work between the US and Asia, and not to mention personal travel, I used to observe how wheelchair services are provided in airports. And quite frankly, it's eye-opening. It's disturbing from some standpoints because a lot of the passengers are left overwhelmed. It's encouraging for a smaller portion of the population because you see that they need the service. So here I am with a reasonable knowledge of being able to build a product, a robotics product, and a need in a setting like an airport where there is a need for an autonomous wheelchair. I spent some time with the service providers that provide services in airports and became absolutely clear to both of us that a smart wheelchair will help not just them as a service provider, but also the passengers who are riding them. So that's where it all started, though.
Fantastic. Your background in sort of creating those consumer products, it seems to be like the ideal fit for this new product. And autonomous vehicles have been, all the rage for the last, 6 months, a year. But I don't think I've ever heard of an autonomous wheelchair. So this is a really interesting concept. I really want to dig into this. But tell me sort of that first few months when you actually thought about this and started to sort of create a business around this product. What was the initial goal? Because I'm sure you're not thinking about a finished product that's way down the line. How do you first get started?
Yeah. So the first thing I did was actually observe. That's really where I spent most of my time. I quit a well-paying job and decided to just travel and visit with friends and family in different parts of Asia. And in the airports, I would just sit and observe, and I started taking notes on what different challenges I saw from the service standpoint. I would talk to a few of those passengers and ask them, "Hey, everyone's left the gate. You guys are left by yourselves. Are you anxious?" And almost every elderly person I spoke with were like, "We are petrified because we need to get to the US and we don't know where the next boarding gate is." Somebody spoke to
Wow.
us in clearly English, but they spoke it too fast with an accent, and we have no idea what's going on. We'll just wait for the service provider to come back and cart us to the next gate. This was almost across the board, something I saw in the Singapore airport, in the Tokyo Narita airport, Haneda airport, Chennai and Bangalore. It was very common in these airports where you would have elderly passengers who needed to get from point A to point B, and they were struggling. And these are large airports, generally speaking. So just walking around to the closest display panel was not obvious. So in some sense, that was my first instantiation of the customer. I still hadn't gotten to the point. In the back of my mind, a smart wheelchair was there all the time, right? So I'll be lying if I said I didn't have a pre-baked solution waiting there. But my pre-baked solution was honestly just an electric wheelchair. My pre-baked solution didn't consider the service provider's needs. It didn't consider things like short-term rides. It didn't consider things like, hey, self-redeploy. All those weren't built into this. So
Right.
as I talked to the service providers, it became totally clear, and we had very candid conversations. These are all off the record kind of conversations we had with them. Uh, Most of them stopped talking once they realized that, oh man, I'm giving away too much information to this random guy who clearly is a traveler, but he's asking me really peculiar questions. I would ask, how many rides do you give a day? How many per hour? Are there peak seasons up and down? Uh, Obviously, I would know what the minimum wage is, and you can tell from somebody's uh, job satisfaction whether they're actually looking for a bump in their salary or not,
Right.
um, and how they interact with the passengers. So I spent quite a bit of time with these service providers and slowly went up the proverbial ladder in their companies and talked to the regional directors and their vice presidents. And without a doubt, as I morphed the feedback from these elderly passengers that I was talking to into the concept of electric wheelchair, including things like ergonomics, including interactive display, including the ability to not bump into obstacles, including the ability to self-redeploy. Uh, every agency I spoke with, their first question was, what's it going to cost? And in my mind, having built products all the way through, cost is a part of the equation. It's one variable in
Right.
your equation. You cannot not talk about cost.
Right.
But they were seeing me more as a technologist, and they were concerned that this was going to be really expensive. Because in all candor, there has been one company that has shopped around an autonomous wheelchair in the past. And their entry point was just too high. The capex needed just to deploy one wheelchair was just too high, and everybody just shot it down. So their concern was, okay, you're talking about all these features, you haven't built anything yet. Here's a company that has some of these features. They've built something. They're crazy expensive.
Yeah.
You're doomed from the get-go.
Right.
So I came back home. I talked to a handful of friends who I've worked with in the past. Uh, some decided to join me on the journey, working part-time. Me, without an income, just sitting at home, burning away our savings. Uh, we started sketching things out. We started building a system architecture. I started talking to suppliers who could potentially supply us. And we made deliberate choices so far along the way that we invent only those things that we need. We are not going to invent a motor. We're not going to invent a motor controller. We're not going to invent a display. We're not going to invent a wheelchair. What we're going to do is borrow from all existing, really mature fields and be a good system integrator. So that's really where we've spent most of our time, just researching what's available there. What can I get for, honestly, dirt cheap? What can I borrow from a parallel industry where the same components are available for a lot cheaper, and from multiple sources, not just the medical wheelchair company space that is already bloated in many ways. So the first few months were spent just doing a bunch of discovery and a lot of
Got
reading, to be honest.
it. Got it. Now, just going back to that medical space, just to understand the market a little bit more, just going from a regular wheelchair to an electric wheelchair is a pretty significant jump as far as price and as far as obviously maintenance and all of those upkeep type things as well. Um, when I look at an airport, and obviously, having traveled, you see the wheelchairs that are available in the airports. They're not even close to what's considered standard in the medical space, right? They're really flimsy. Really, they're meant to just get you across an airport. Those types of things, they're not meant to be comfortable. So I'm guessing the price point for those is also significantly lower. And now you're talking about making that jump not just to an electric wheelchair, but to an autonomous wheelchair. So it seems like in the medical space, the the divide is maybe this big, and now you're talking about a divide that's this big. So tell me how you sort of wrap your mind around all of those things. And obviously, you mentioned you have a competitor in this space already. How do you manage your costs to stay, significantly below where they are?
Yeah. So you have a few questions wrapped in here, Dhava. So I'll start with the simplest one, right?
Okay.
Wheelchairs in airports. They typically come in, I would say, two flavors. One flavor is this collapsible wheelchair, which you're right is a quote unquote really cheap product. It's quite robust to be perfectly
Okay.
fair to that industry, right? Uh, uh, some of the wheelchairs that are sitting in inventory right now in airports have been there for like 12 years.
Wow. Okay.
They've had some upkeep to them. They would change the leather for fake leather covers on them. They would upgrade the flagpoles to make them compliant, but nothing significant. So they're pretty robust things. Uh, so that's one class of products, and they typically cost between $300 and $400 per wheelchair,
Okay.
which is not the retail price you get for a manual wheelchair in the market today. You can get a
Right.
manual wheelchair in the market today for about $60.
Okay.
So the reason these airport ones are as expensive as they are, at about $300-400, is simply because they're slightly more robust. They can take a beating,
Right.
unlike the pure manual ones that you get off of a shipment container from China. Now, there's another class that are non-collapsible. They're made by a company called Staxi. The frames are comparable in strength. They're quite robust as well. They also take a beating, but they have very few damageable parts. Now, the collapsible wheelchairs, they have the seat that's collapsible, the backrest that's collapsible, so it tears. It has casters that break. The Staxi one is slightly smarter. Um, those still cost between $500 and $700 each. So that's really where we got some of our inspiration from, by looking at these two and saying, hey, how are they able to take what looks like the $100 wheelchair, the $60 wheelchair, but is able to survive for 5, 6, 10 years in the airport? So we use that as a baseline for our mechanical frame for the wheelchair. So we've tried to stay in the mechanical cost structure by standing on the shoulders of giants, if I may, that have built the existing wheelchairs. On the electric side, that's the second layer of your question. How have we kept the costs where they are? So there is a cost divide over there. Now you can get an electric wheelchair certified from China in the order of about $400 US. Um, is it the most robust solution? Perhaps not, but it starts about 400. It goes to about, I would say, 1500. This is a certified, reliable product, typically made in China, because China is where most batteries and motors are made, right? So the supply chain in the States is very limited. In Europe, is very limited. They still buy the batteries and motors from China. So this is the range of electric wheelchairs, somewhere between about $400-500, all the way up to about $1,500. The retail price for these is a whole different story. You go to your Permobils and your more reputed wheelchair manufacturers, you will get these for about $8,000-9,000. Now, there is a very simple reason for that. Those are made for full-time use, like somebody who is disabled and needs a wheelchair to move around at all times.
Right.
The little fork in the road that we took was saying, hey, we're looking at a fleet service. So we need the robustness of the existing wheelchairs in the airports, but we don't need the ergonomics to make it such that it fits a disabled person for 10 hours a day. We need to serve a disabled person or person with restricted mobility for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes.
Right.
So there are things we can do on the ergonomics of the seat, on the ergonomics of the arm.
Nope. Raju, I think I just lost you.
You still there?
Right. I lost you there for a second. Uh, yep.
I
Now
am
it
still
looks
losing
like
you.
we're
I
back.
can hear you.
Okay. I can.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, your video is frozen, but I can certainly hear you. Okay, now I can see you. Can you see me? Can you hear
I
me?
can. I can.
Okay.
Everything is
Uh,
good. And I have red bars sitting on the Wi-Fi.
okay. We're gonna have to obviously cut this part out, but I lost you right as you were saying ergonomics of the seat, ergonomics of the arms. So why don't we pick
Yeah.
up from that again?
Yeah. So there are multiple classes of medical grade wheelchairs that index a lot on the ergonomics of the seat for a full-time use passenger. We don't have a full-time use passenger. We have a short-term use passenger who today is very comfortable on the quote unquote bad ergonomics of the Staxies and the foldable wheelchairs. So all we had to do was identify that, hey, what little upgrade do we have to do the ergonomics of the seat and ergonomics of the armrest so that we can bump up this customer from the Staxi and the low-cost wheelchairs onto our product, but still not spend the kind of ergonomic expenses that the Permobiles and the Jazzies make. So
Right.
that's the middle ground we found. So we've uh, uh, begged, borrowed, and stolen drivetrains from the electric kick scooter market. So the electric kick scooter market grossly subsidized motor development. They grossly subsidized for us, not for themselves, grossly subsidized battery development. So you get high capacity lithium ion batteries at relatively low costs. You get high powered motors from kick scooters at relatively low cost. The motors that are used in the higher end wheelchairs are purpose built for wheelchairs. So, and they have a total addressable market of maybe a few tens of thousands of wheelchairs. So they're still amortizing their NREs. Whereas we
Mm,
have taken a motor which has been amortized now about 2 years ago. So we are literally just copy pasting something that the kick scooter market is using. So we've
got it.
tried to use this combination of what the electric kick scooter market subsidized from a drivetrain standpoint onto a electric wheelchair so that we can keep our costs in check. So for in some sense, to call us an electric wheelchair is a bit of a overstatement because we don't expect this to be a full-time use by any user. We
Right.
expect it to be a short-term use. Could somebody use it full-time? Sure. But depending on your disability, you might not find it as comfortable. You will not have the kinds of knobs that medical wheelchairs have to make ergonomic adjustments.
Got
So
it.
we've tried to manage costs by doing that. Uh, your third question, Dhaval, was around the existing competition, right? Now, the existing competition is a company called Wheel, Whill. They are an exceptional wheelchair manufacturing company. They've got a really good, robust, full-time use wheelchair that they have just added sensors to make it autonomous. Sensors and
Mm,
compute to make autonomous. So you start off with a very high cost platform, and then you layer on expensive sensors onto them. And now over time, they've lowered their sensor and compute costs. We are not beholden to this high platform that they're beholden to. So
got
that's
it.
something I think we differentiate quite a bit from the standpoint of bringing a truly cost-effective, robust, fleet-ready wheelchair. The wheelchairs that our competition is using, or at least what I consider competition is using, is not fleet-worthy. It still takes multiple man hours to tear it down. Whereas to be
Mm,
fleet worthy, you've got to be able to tear it down in the order of minutes and then put it
right.
back together in the order of minutes so that repair and servicing is low cost.
Right. Very interesting. Okay. So tell me how long it sort of took you to go through this thought process, find all of the pieces that are out there, because it seems like you're pulling from a lot of different sources and put together an MVP. Uh, what was that time period like?
So, truth be told, I told you I had this in the back of my mind, right? An autonomous
Yeah.
wheelchair. So the MVP, in some sense, was already kicked off in my mind. I would say around October 2019. It did not have the redeployment features. It did not have the fancy display, but it had the sensor stack that we needed to make it an obstacle avoidance wheelchair. That was our MVP is an obstacle avoidance wheelchair. That's really what our MVP is.
Got it.
We've just made it more functional, but that was not the intent of the MVP.
Got it.
So we started back in October 2019, and it was probably April 2020 before I could get the the collision avoidance working in a manner that I thought was ready to be able to capture a video and send it out to a bunch of folks who were interested.
Oh my God. I'm just thinking about that time frame, April 2020. That's pretty much when everything shut down. All the airports. What was that period like? What was the rest of 2020 like for you?
Yeah, there's a part of me that says it was awful, but there's another huge part of me that's awful simply because nobody would talk to us anymore. Because they all said that, hey, what can I tell you? Our market's shut down. I don't know if I'll have my
Right.
team tomorrow. I don't know if the government debt relief is going to come in to keep our company alive. So, but that's one side. The other side is I had committed to this, so I got to stick with it for the long run. What's happening in the market, yes, it does impact my ability to fundraise. It does impact my ability to get folks to work with me. But I already have a group of relatively smart people who are giving me their free time in the order of about 30 hours a week sometimes. So they're giving me a lot of time. They're giving me a lot of encouragement. I can't let them down. So this almost came like a blessing to me. By this, I mean COVID, where I could say, take a step back, focus on the product, and keep working on the product, refine the product. So between, I would say, April and October of 2020, it was nothing but just chipping away at the product feature by feature. And our good fortune, by the time our design was getting somewhat wrapped up, China had opened back up. US was still shut down, so I'll get to that in a bit. But one of our design partners, design meaning industrial design, they were based in India, so they were able to work all the way through summer. The industrial designers are the creative kind, so they don't really need an office to work in. They'll work from anywhere.
Yep.
The only thing they needed the office for was to do an ergonomic study. So they would come in as two people and do their ergonomic study. Me sitting in San Jose, getting on calls with them in India. In Gurugram was interesting in many ways, but it kept things going. Right, so we had the momentum,
Right.
and we had done enough of most of the work was now sitting in CAD and software that could easily be done at home remotely. So even today,
Right.
we are a team of 4. We are completely in different parts of the world. We are between San Jose, Fort Lauderdale, Knoxville, Tennessee, and Salem, India. And for some reason, it feels like we're moving smoothly. And we haven't seen each other in God knows how long. But, well, we see each
Right.
other
Over
on
Zoom, but
video,
not in
but we've
person.
never
Yeah.
met, right, from that standpoint during the course of this work. So it was painful from many standpoints, but it was a blessing from many, many other standpoints because it allowed us to focus on the product. And it, in some sense, tested my mettle. As in, am I really committed to this, or am I doing this for fun, for grins and giggles?
Right.
So it tested me in many ways. I had my down days, but it's those few up days. It's a few days when the guy from Prospect calls and says, "Hey, we looked at all the cost models you put in place. You're actually off." And I'm smashing my head saying, "Oh man, there goes the business." They're like, "No, you're off the wrong way. It's a much bigger business than you've projected." So
Interesting.
those were the few up days, and I still cling on to them as tight as I can.
Right. So, okay. So I think you laid out the timeline really beautifully. So let's get to the end of 2020. What does the product look like? I think you have a couple of pictures in the pitch deck that obviously the investors can see once they log into Startup Steroid. But it essentially looks like a standard wheelchairs with a bunch of gadgets attached to it. So talk to me about what are those things and how do they function?
Yeah. So in the pitch deck, in one of the slides, you'll see three pictures next to each other. One would say MVP, that's still alive, is sitting in the garage. I drive it around. I bump into a few obstacles from time to time, but we're learning.
Right.
There's this thing in the middle which looks like a finished product, and it's, I think, on slide 2 or 3, you'll see a much larger picture of the finished product that has been designed, purpose built for an airport. Uh, Towards the end of 2020, we have now been rejected by some 13 different manufacturers in the US simply because they don't have the capacity in COVID times to be able to build a prototype for us. And they're not interested in onesie twosies. They want high volume.
Right.
We're not at high volume yet. We still got to go through the prototype development cycle. And serendipitously, we find a manufacturer in India, in Bangalore, who is, in some sense, bored by doing the same thing again and again every day in their current business. And I use the word bored very loosely, so forgive me if I'm disparaging them, but that's not the intent. But the intent is to say that they were looking for a creative
Right.
outlet. They were looking to do something new. And serendipitously, through alma maters of my dad, and it's a strange connection, worth a story some other time. This gentleman says, "Hey, it looks hard enough for me to give it a shot. Let me give this a shot. Uh, I have nothing to lose. I've been rejected by 13 manufacturers in the US. There are
Right.
two in China who are wanting to nibble on it, but I'm not there yet with them because the DFM, the design for manufacturing process, is taking a little bit longer with them than I had expected. So we're still doing that. And this gentleman in India picks it up. Um, and he builds things cost-wise in an amazing scale, meaning he's charging us stuff that he should charge us in mass production. He's not charging us
Wow.
prototype
Okay.
costs, which are usually
Right.
about 5 to 8x mass production costs. He's
Right.
charging us mass production pricing. He's slower than we had expected, but I'm not in a rush. I don't want to do uh, the wrong thing fast. I'd rather do the right thing slow.
Right.
Especially when it comes to manufacturing. If I build a prototype that crashes the first day, I'm done.
Right.
There's no two ways about this. I got to build it right. This is the first time I'm getting at this. Let me do it right.
Yep.
So we put up with him. We put up a whole bunch of tests and checkpoints in place, and by the end of December or end of 2020, we've got a solution that is ready to get assembled, and that's really where we ended the year.
Okay. So
So
tell
we've
me
got that
about
middle
the
piece. That
right.
middle piece being the looks like prototype. That's uh, in the process of being manufactured now.
Got it. So when we're talking about this functionality, obviously, a battery and a motor are they're sort of the cost to enter the market. But then, what other sensors and instruments do you have on board? Are we talking about just cameras? Are we talking about radars? Are we talking about talk to me about the technology piece of the puzzle.
Right. So start off saying this is an indoor use product,
Yep.
and it moves at slow speeds. So you always have to, the lens you have to put in front of your face is always low speed indoor, low speed indoor. And you'll very quickly realize we do not need the expensive solutions. We don't need high-end flash lidars. We don't need lidars. Now, could we use them? Absolutely. But do we need them? So, and the answer is no. So we've very carefully picked, based on need, a sensor stack that consists of uh, a vision system, meaning just vision, nothing else.
Hmm.
A depth solution, which is, if you may, something like a time of flight solution, where I project a pattern and I see how
Yep.
quickly that pattern comes back, which works only indoors. It will not work outdoors. But the vision works outdoors. So we've got that balance between these two. So we've offloaded whatever, there's two ways to look at this. Dump a ton of the sensing cost on the sensor and keep high compute, which is your LiDAR, or dump a whole bunch of cost on your compute and lower
Right.
the cost of your sensors.
Right.
We've gone the second route because we know compute is going to scale. It scales with time. It has scaled more, hasn't let us down in 30 years.
Yep.
Now, Will he? He might, but I think Gordon Moore has been mostly right. So our sensor stack consists of a need, as in what do I need to detect? I need to detect things at least 30 frames a second. I need to detect things that are able to react at my speeds, which are 2-3 miles an hour, at distances of 1.5 to 2 meters. I don't need to know what 150 meters at 70 kilometers an hour looks like, or 70
Right.
miles an hour to make it worse, right?
Right.
So our sensor stack consists of ultrasonics. I'll start at the beginning. Sorry, vision, depth, ultrasonics, and we are right now investigating time of flight, a conventional time of flight, and a conventional radar. So these are
Okay.
and all these are scaling with consumer electronics. So we have deliberately picked solution sets where we can ride the coattails or the tailwinds
Right.
of consumer electronics, which is going to drive costs down.
Got it. Got it. And now let's talk about the user experience. Once someone actually sits down in the product, oh, do they just push a button and then the wheelchair goes, or do they manually control? Is it a combination? Give us a little more color on the product.
Yeah, so at the simplest user interaction, you would first start off by scanning your boarding pass. Your boarding pass consists of every tiny detail you can imagine about your flight. Where you're connecting, when you're connecting, what gate it's supposed to be on at the time of printing the boarding pass. And that
Right.
barcode will change over time. Your name, your age, your gender, everything. So the moment you scan it in, the backend software systems, which in all candor we have not implemented yet, but our partners have that implemented already. When I say partners, I'm talking about guys like Prospect Airport Services. So we would be leveraging their backend interfaces. We know where it needs to go to. We know when it needs to be there, and obviously we know where we are today. So
Right.
these three are well understood today. We have a map of the airport as well, so we know how to navigate it. Could this be just hit a button? Sure, but I don't think it's going to end up being that simple. I say that simply because we'll have to first educate the user, saying, "Hey, scan your boarding pass, sit down. This is the path the vehicle is going to take, at least initially." Uh, you have at all times the ability to override with a joystick if you did not like the path or the route or the speed or whatever that the wheelchair is taking. So at any time you override with the joystick, a new path is computed. Anytime you override with the joystick, the autonomous system say, "Hey, looks like somebody's taken over. Let me back off until they tell me to kick back in again." So the user interface will always have the button that you're referring to that says, "Yes,
Right.
please continue." But at any point in time, your ultimate non-maskable interrupt, if I may use that phrase, meaning nobody can override that interrupt, is the joystick. The moment you touch
Right.
the joystick, the computers back off,
Everything
and they
stops.
wait
Right.
and they wait for the next user interrupt to come in to say go.
Okay.
There's always a stop button. If you didn't like anything, hit the stop button, and the computer says, "Okay, somebody didn't like me. Let me not do
Yeah.
anything."
Okay. And let's take this a step further still, where a lot of the passengers who will be using the chair, they may be elderly, they may not really know what's happening,
Yeah, yeah,
so they may not necessarily know how to hit stop or use the joystick, uh,
exactly.
but at the same time they want that human connection, so someone helping them out,
Yeah,
even if it's not in right there in the room.
yeah.
How do you deal with situations like that?
Yeah, so the way we've tried to envision this is there'll be a process for onboarding. So somebody will get you comfortable with it. If your answer is, "I'm not comfortable writing this," and it's a harsh way to say this, but you probably are not ready to uh, go on the journey by yourself.
Right.
So like you mentioned, you want somebody with you. But the whole point of this business model is if I were to dedicate somebody next to the wheelchair, uh, we've not done it. We've not changed anything.
They might as
So
well
would
be
we
pushing it. Right.
might as well be pushing it. So the alternatives that we have spoken about with the service agencies is we will have a video stream of a person on your screen, uh, always there, ready to interact with you. So think of it as your virtual assistant, but it's a human being who is arguably your remote pilot, is your remote teleoperator, who's always there to help you should you run into any trouble. So there is that limited human interaction, not as much as one would like. There's no touch. There's no speaking on by your ear, but they're the other end of that display that we have in the product.
Got it. And they'll have the
That's how
ability
we've
to actually
envisioned this with
drive.
the service provider.
Right. And they'll actually, the remote pilot will actually have the ability to drive the wheelchair. So this way they can take control and say, okay, let me take you to the left. And then actually the wheelchair goes to the left.
That's absolutely right. So the remote pilot will always have the ability to override. Now, if you are messing with the joystick and the remote pilot's messing, you got a problem. You can have only one master. So obviously, when the remote pilot's driving, you're hands off as a passenger, and you're just there for the ride.
Right. Okay. So I think I have a pretty good sense of the product and the progress so far today. What's the plan for 2021? Where are you hoping to sort of take the company over the next 12 months?
So right now we are in the process of building the first two prototypes. Most of the parts for it are sitting in different parts of this house right now. They are waiting for the metal parts to arrive from India. This gentleman who serendipitously I met, he's putting it together. So he should be able to ship this out by the end of next week. So let's, for grins and giggles, say that the metal parts are here by mid-March. So it'll be about mid-April before I can complete it with all the plastic parts that I have here in the motors and the batteries. So by mid-April, we will have a working form factor prototype. The intention is to port all of our software that we have developed on the MVP onto this. And we are budgeting about a month's worth of work just for iterative improvements. So by mid-May, we will have this working prototype ready to be trialed at the San Jose airport. And I say San Jose simply because they've been chomping at the bit to get this wheelchair deployed. This is not ready for deployment yet, right? So it's still just a trial with our employees and maybe the few employees in San Jose who are interested in riding it. It's still not open to passengers. It's not until summer when we've vetted out this hardware, we made sure it's working right, made our tiny iterations to it. If it requires bigger iterations, we have a problem. So the schedule resets. So tiny iterations. By summer, we will have 5 more of these devices that will be deployable and in San Jose Airport or in San Francisco Airport. And right now we're in conversations with both airports to trial this with passengers in the summer. All these trials will be non-revenue trials. These will be trials to learn. These will be trials to make improvements. And the intention is that by Q4 of this year, we get to a revenue state with one of the 2 service providers who works in San Jose or San Francisco. So the intention is to get to revenue by Q4 of 2021 with a small fleet, not more than 50 vehicles.
Okay, so end the year by about 50 or less than 50 vehicles.
Correct.
Is the idea. Okay. So I think I sort of understand the potential of this this platform. What's the grander vision, if you would? What's the 3-5 year vision? Because obviously investors are going to be highly focused on that. Where do you expect to take this company?
If I might be brutally honest, in the 3-year time frame, I think we're still deploying. We're still increasing the number of airports, the number of people we can touch with this product. In the 5-year time frame, I'm hoping to have an exit with one of the service providers that's already there. And we've quite candidly had this conversation with 2 of the service providers who've expressed interest and said, and where they have expressed saying, you could just become an extension of our company,
right?
Where we absorb you so that the other guy doesn't get access to your technology. So you're not selling technology to the other guys.
Right.
Because the 2 companies we're talking to have both clearly felt or stated, hey, this is coming.
Yeah.
We're not going to stop this. Autonomous cars are driving out there. They may not be doing exceptionally well, but they're there. It's not going to take a monumental effort to uh, translate that into our business, because they are fighting three kinds of headwinds. The first headwind is labor costs. Labor costs are increasing. The second headwind is the demand from various cities to add healthcare into uh, into their pay. So, both of them hit their bottom line, right? There's no issue
Right.
about there. The third is they don't know how to staff. They struggle with staffing today. So the way they solve the staffing problem, which is you have peaks of demand where you have sometimes 90 people getting off a plane or need to get off a
Right.
plane to turn around. They don't have 90 people on their staff that can be
Right.
dedicated to one aircraft. So they're constantly battling staffing. Even if the other two didn't exist, they still have to solve this third problem. And today they have no solution for it except to delay the passenger, which today the passenger is willing to say, you know what, I'm old, I'll just wait. I don't have
Right.
anywhere to be. I don't have a pressing demand to get somewhere. So these service providers are always, at least today, fighting these three problems without COVID, right?
Mm.
Without an economic downturn. So let's park that aside altogether. So they need a solution that addresses these three. Today they don't have any. So I'm personally convinced that in the 5-year horizon, there's an exit with one of these service providers for sure for the company. That's from the financial standpoint. But while we're doing this, today it's a wheelchair. Nothing stops us from making this an automatic luggage carrier that is
Mm.
trailing you, that is uh, the same technology stack, nothing different. Of course, there's no joystick sitting on it, of course. But this is carrying your luggage, your smart
Right.
cards. So, uh, and there's a potential to take that into a whole different business altogether. And here, we're still talking just the airport vertical. We haven't talked about the other verticals we can be addressing. So I think the potential is for Blueberry is significant.
Fantastic, fantastic. So we've had, by the way, name of the company Blueberry Technology. Obviously, we want to make sure we highlight that. We've gone through sort of the entire story, but there are obviously a lot of sort of ins and outs. Is there anything important that I should have asked you that I might not have?
Uh, quite honestly, I think we've touched upon a lot, Dhaval.
Yeah.
We've not skipped a beat in many of these conversations in any particular place. But
Right.
there is, uh, in all candor, I said something out very nonchalantly, saying there are other verticals. But I want to be cautious about other verticals. This product, this solution that we are putting in place, it works only when there is frequent use of the product.
Mm.
So, which airports, hospitals. That's
Right.
about it. Every other vertical there is more of a publicity mechanism, is more of a mechanism for us to learn something new for the technology. Uh, if I were to example, take museums, take grocery stores, take um, any other facility where there's theme parks, the utility over there is not that frequent. You don't, so this works, the business works only when there are lots of wheelchairs used frequently. Uh,
Right.
so when I threw out that phrase, there are many other verticals we can go after. I have to be a little cautious about that. I don't want to paint too rosy a story and say that, hey, this can be a B2C product, or this can be a 5-unit deployment at a Costco. It doesn't
Right.
work at 5 units because
Right.
the economics are just not there.
Yep. No,
So there is that
and
wrinkle, Dhaval.
yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And it's also important to recognize the TAM with this product, right? With the airport space and just and that's I know the information is in your pitch deck, and that's a significant TAM that you're going after, even if we don't, if even if we disregard all of those other verticals. So I think that's an important realization, and I think investors who go through your pitch deck will very quickly realize that. So I appreciate you sort of pointing that out. and highlighting that. Once again, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I feel like I learned a lot, and I have a much better understanding of your product. So really well done, and thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dhaval. Thank you for the time, and thanks for the engaging conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.